Hey everyone, and welcome. Today, we're kicking off section 1 of our 7-part PNJ Group training series all about credit losses. Specifically, we're talking about what CCL is and why it changed. I am absolutely pumped to guide you through this explainer because this is a topic that literally reshapes the entire balance sheet. We're grounding ourselves in ASC 326, which introduces this framework you're going to get to know really well. Honestly, if you're involved in day-to-day financial statement work, mastering CCL isn't just some nice-to-have skill, it's an absolute necessity. So we're going to break it all down, starting with the big picture of what it actually is, and maybe, more importantly, why the accounting world decided it was time to just tear up the old rulebook. Here is a quick roadmap of the conceptual journey we're taking together today. We'll start with our welcome and course context, then step back in time to the 2008 financial crisis. After that, we'll explore something accountants call the dangerous gap, do a deep dive into incurred versus expected losses, and finally wrap it all up with CCL in practice. Let's get right into it. All right, Section 1, Welcome and Course Context, grounding ourselves in ASC 326. Okay, so what exactly is CCL? Well, it stands for Current Expected Credit Loss, codified under ASC 326. Simply put, it's the accounting model that officially replaced the old incurred loss model for estimating uncollectible amounts on things like receivables, loans, and other financial assets measured at amortized cost. But here's the real kicker. The paradigm shift here is huge. The single biggest change is that a company must now estimate and record the full lifetime expected credit loss on a financial asset the exact moment that asset is first recognized. You do this before any specific default has actually occurred, and regardless of how incredibly healthy the customer looks to you today. Moving on to Section 2, the 2008 financial crisis, the catalyst for changing the rules. To really get why we have ASC 326 today, we have to ask, why did the rules even need to change in the first place? Well, let's pivot back to 2008. The global financial crisis was the absolute trigger for this massive overhaul. The old incurred loss model came under intense, scorching criticism back then, and honestly, for very good reason. See, under those old rules, a loss could only be recorded when you had objective evidence that a loss event had already occurred. The probability threshold was set ridiculously high. A loss had to be deemed probable before you were allowed to recognize it on your financial statements. Think about how crazy that is. Even if you saw the writing on the wall and you knew your customers were struggling, you couldn't record a loss until you had specific, documentable evidence. Your hands were totally tied by the rules. Which brings us to Section 3, the dangerous gap. Let's look at how this delayed recognition actually amplified the crisis. That strict requirement from the old rules created something incredibly risky. It created this blind spot where rapidly deteriorating credit quality was entirely invisible on the books. Let's walk through this timeline to see exactly how that played out. So on day 1, a loan is originated. The borrower looks perfectly fine, so naturally, no loss is recorded. Makes sense, right? But jump forward to month 6. The borrower is visibly struggling. Delinquencies are up. The economy is shaking. But under the old rules, still no loss recorded because there's no documentable, probable loss event yet. The books stay completely silent. Then, suddenly, we hit month 12. The borrower officially defaults, and boom, a massive, sudden loss is recorded all at once. Now, multiply that dynamic across millions of loans during a financial crisis. The result? Massive losses materialized out of nowhere, amplifying the economic shock instead of smoothing it out. When you put the net effect of these two models side by side across the exact same credit cycle, the difference is night and day. On the left, under the old incurred loss model, losses are vastly understated early on and then wildly overstated at the point of default. It was just misleading throughout the life of the asset. But over on the right, with the new CCL model, by estimating lifetime losses up front, the losses are recognized earlier and way more evenly. As credit quality drops, you just adjust your allowance incrementally. It's infinitely more transparent across the whole cycle, and it completely avoids that predictable chaos. Now for Section 4, Incurred versus Expected Losses. This is a fundamental conceptual shift. We've seen the history, but now let's look under the hood. CECL is not just a timing change. It alters the entire DNA of how we view risk. Instead of delaying recognition to wait for evidence, CECL demands immediate, day 1 recognition. Plus, where the old model only let you look at past events and current conditions, CECL requires you to look at historical data, current conditions, and reasonable and supportable forecasts. You actually have to look forward now. And finally, notice how the time horizon shifts. It goes from just near-term, currently estimable losses to the lifetime expected credit losses over the full remaining life of the asset. Listen, if there's only one single thing you take away from this entire explainer, let it be this. We are completely removing the probability threshold. The old model said a loss had to be probable to record. The CCL model? No threshold at all. If a company estimates there's merely a 1 or 2% chance of loss on a receivable, well, that 1 or 2% must be calculated and reflected in the allowance. This fundamentally changes the math for every single financial asset on your balance sheet from the day it's first recorded. All right, Section 5, CECL in practice. Let's look at the day one reality for financial statements. Theory is great, but let's make this tangible with a real-world scenario. Imagine your company just had an amazing day. You generated $1 million in brand new, shiny invoices. You've vetted these customers, their credit is stellar, the economy is humming along nicely, and everyone looks perfectly healthy. Sounds great, right? Well, hold on. Because under CCL, you can't just assume 100% collection. You have to look at your historical data, assess the current conditions, and factor in those forecasts we talked about. Let's say, after all that rigorous analysis, you estimate a small 2% expected loss rate over the lifetime of those specific receivables. Because there's no probability threshold to hide behind anymore, that 2% triggers an immediate $20,000 credit loss expense on your income statement on day one, the exact same day those invoices are created. Let that sink in for a second. There is no grace period. You aren't waiting for a customer to miss a payment. Your income statement takes the hit immediately. So just to summarize this day one reality under ASC 326, because this is exactly why mastering these rules is absolutely crucial to your daily financial statement preparation. The impact of the income statement is immediate. The allowance you set up on the balance sheet reflects your best estimate of the total expected uncollected amounts. And critically, it covers the entire remaining life of those assets, not just the near term. You're actively front-loading your risk recognition to make sure everything is completely transparent. So, we know what CCL is, we know why it changed after 2008, and we know the profound impact it has on day one. But that leaves us with a massive, incredibly important question. How do we actually build this day one estimate? Like, what assets are even in scope? How do we group them? And what methods do we use to calculate that exact number? Well, that is exactly what we're going to uncover in our next lesson, Scope and Day One Recognition. Until then, keep analyzing, keep questioning, and I'll catch you in the next explainer.